Okay, so welcome to the second video in our course. This is Native Americans Part 1. Before we begin, I want to address something that a lot of students get concerned about. They worry that history is going to be memorizing a lot of facts and dates, and that might be your experience from before, but actually we don't do any of that. In fact, for online, you don't have to memorize anything because everything is open, note. And even on exams, you don't have to really memorize. It's more the other things. So knowledge you can see from this is Bloom's taxonomy. It's an educational tool and it lists the levels of critical thinking. So knowledge or just memorizing stuff is at the bottom. It's the least level of critical thinking. The things that are higher are comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And you might remember those from what we did the last video. So we synthesized, we analyzed, we constructed a comparative analysis, we evaluated perspective and prejudice. You don't see memorized dates here, right? So you should know centuries, you should know 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. When we get to the 1900s, you should know the difference between the 1920s, the 1930s, 40s, 50s. But there's no memorizing just to memorize. And again, we'll be going over all of that. I do want you to remember some important things though. And the first one is what's called ideas. If you remember that from the first video, this is how you will answer every question in this course. So what does the acronym IDEA stand for? It's D, identify what you're being asked, define your terms always give it evidence, like a short quote, not a paragraph. Analyze, restate exactly everything that's in the quote. Don't just, skim it by and think that the quote's going to do your work for you. And then significance. Why is this important? How does this answer the question? Creating a thesis includes answering the questions A, what, why, and how, and which is not a primary source. It's a textbook. So every time I do a lecture, I'm going to give you a thesis because we're always arguing something. So for example, our first thesis for first content lecture is our country's history begins with the clash of Native and European peoples. So everything we talk about, just like when you write an essay, everything you talk about should relate back to your thesis. That's what's going to happen here. So we're going to be looking at preconceptions or misconceptions on the part of the natives and the Europeans. And we're going to use primary sources to discover worldview. We're going to do a little activity that's pretty fun with the circle story you'll see later. The next video is kind of PG rated. It's very interesting. It's how do Native relationships differ from European relationships. Okay, so these are the first two questions you're going to answer, and I'm going to explain them, and then I'm going to give you the material. Okay, so choose two of the following pictures. So I'm going to give you some pictures and answer the above question. What did Europeans think of Native Americans? And then the next one is choose two of the following quotes and answer the question, what did Native Americans think of Europeans? So here is the first picture. And what I want you to imagine is that you're a European, you can't read, you're trying to decide if you should come to America or not because, your life is not great over in Europe. So you're looking at this, and what I want you to do based on this picture or one of the other two that are going to follow is think, what did Europeans think of Native Americans? What I don't want you to do is to take some stereotype that you learned from, high school or elementary school, whatever, and then apply that to the picture. I want you to look at the picture only based on evidence. Tell me what you think they believe, the Europeans, this guy, whoever drew this. What do you think they thought of Native Americans? Here's the second picture, your second choice. And here's your third choice. So the figure that's flying above is red, just to let you know. So choose two of those. And what did Europeans think of Native Americans? Again, only based on evidence. And then there's going to be three quotes and a story. You can answer the question, what did Native Americans think of Europeans? So choose one of these, and then or two of those, and then this one. So out of four, you need to choose two. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to give you a little lecture on the worldview points, and I want you to take some notes on this, and then you're going to be needing this material for later. So the first thing is that the Native American worldview would be that time is cyclical and repetitive. And when I asked you about their worldview point, I do need these points exactly, not just something that we know from previous. But on December 31st, most people in the United States now celebrate New Year's Eve, and we make resolutions, and we say we're going to be better next year, and we're very into progress. Things are getting better. All right, but that's not how natives thought. Natives think of time as being a cycle and repetitive. So for example, the seasons are reincarnation. Now this is what's called the circle story. We're going to do an activity with this later. And if you look in the center, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? It goes around in a circle. My cousin says she's married to a Native American, and she said, I speak like a Native American. I speak in circles. So I think that means like repeating themes, right? But it's cyclical and repetitive. Okay, the next one is the holiness of the dream world. And if a native would have a dream, let's say they have a dream that they hurt somebody, then they need to go and make, amends with that person the next day. They believe that those dreams are absolutely real. This native has painted their dream on their teepee. So would we do that? Would people, living today in the United States, I mean, maybe natives would do that, but other ethnicities, would we paint our dreams on our garage? Usually not, right? We're more private, or we think that their dreams are sort of weird and from our subconscious. But the natives would say, no, they're holy and they need to be revered. Now take a look at this quote, and you can have see these full readings in your readings if you want to in the reading section. But this is Columbus, so take a look at that, and what seems to be the native value here, what seems to be Columbus's value. So do you see any potential for trouble here? So we see that Columbus is just giving them junk, right? But he says they seem very content, and the reason why is because natives are not materialistic. For example, when they die, they would be buried with their good things. So there's no big fighting with heirs and whatever like there would be over in Europe. So that would be reciprocity and exchange. They do expect, that you give and then you take kind of equal amount, but they're not materialistic. This is the Catawba deerskin map. And as we know, a lot of the natives were decimated by disease when the Europeans came over. And so what happened is they created this organizational chart, basically is what it is, and created new tribes and also new ways that they were going to use the land. That's the important word, use the land. So for example, in the upper left-hand corner would be tribe A would maybe say, hey, we're going to farm there. Tribe B would be the next one over, we're going to hunt there. Tribe C would be the next one over, we're going to farm there. Now, if tribe A did not show up one year, then tribe B could go use that, or tribe D or E or F. They didn't believe in ownership. Does that happen with the Europeans? No, not at all, right? And that's one with the land, or usufruct. So usufruct means to use the land. It means not to own the land, and that's the Native American worldview. Okay, here is a picture of some natives dressed up as bears. And if we were in class, I would show you Brother Bear, just a couple minutes. So, no big loss there, right, you guys? But what that was about is 3 natives who, and their brothers, and one of the brothers was killed by a bear. So another one of the brothers goes to avenge his death, and he actually becomes a bear. So what natives believe is boundaries are permeable. And if you have a science background, you've taken any science classes, permeable means like holes and that they can pass through. With Europeans, they would say, here's the plants, here's the animals, here's the humans, and they never intertwine. With the natives, they would say, hey, a human can become an animal, can become a spirit. Excuse me. So what I want you to do is to read these stories, and you can read the whole thing in your readings if you want, but you also can just, deal with this here. In the Legend of Wounty, going back to those stories, which of those 5 points does this illustrate? Not just something you make up on your own, it needs to be one of those 5 points. And why? The bear legend, the great flood. And then what we're going to do now is the last thing is the circle story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a number of the answers, and then you're going to fill in the rest. So this is 1 through 5, so read that, and you'll see it relates to 1 through 5, the central area. And then what I want you to do is to say, what do you think 6 is, 10, 11, 12, 15, 18, 23, 27, 35, and 37. Okay, and that will be your second assignment. Okay, so again, we talked about our country's history begins with the clash of Native and European peoples. We talked about preconceptions or misconceptions on both sides. And then we use primary sources to discover worldview. And then next time, we'll do how did Native relationships differ from European relationships? And that's it. So thank you very much.